Today on Locked On Canadiens, somebody call Marty because we've solved the series.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Canadiens. We want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. My name is Laura Saba, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian, also known as a massive nerd who has been doing some homework with respect to the series. Hopefully, Marty's doing that same homework. So, at the top of the show, I said that we've solved the series, but I was obviously being quite glib, but we do want to talk today not just about some matchups that the Canadiens can exploit and what Ian discovered in his research and looking back at the underlying numbers of the game. We're also going to talk about how the Canadiens can prepare for Game 2 and hopefully get a better result on that one. And then we're going to talk about what we're feeling about whether or not Arber Xhekaj is actually going to draw into the lineup. And don't forget, we have our trivia, and we also have a contest that we forgot to mention on yesterday's episode because we were so excited the Canadiens did not faceplant in that first game against the Caps. All right, Ian, how are you doing?
Doing well. You mentioned I dove in and did some homework. It's the time of year where you elevate, Laura. You elevate your game. They're doing it. We're going to follow. I wanted to sort of dive into a bit more of the matchups aspect of this because that's where these series are won and lost. Is if coaching can have an impact, it's making sure that you have your guys out against the guys you want them to be playing against. Obviously, it's tough for Montreal to do that on the road. The home team gets the last change. Spencer Carberry is an excellent coach for Washington, one of the great up-and-comers in this game. Probably going to win the Jack Adams in a walk, honestly. I don't know that that's much of a conversation, honestly. But I do think that there were some interesting things to take away from this first game. And the one that jumps off the page to me is just how great the Suzuki line truly was. The boy genius line matched up against Karlsson and Chychrun for Washington, who I would think coming into this one is Washington's number one defense pair. They are a prototypical number one defense pair. The Suzuki line, they took 15 shifts against the Suzuki line, that Karlsson-Chychrun pairing. The Suzuki line had 22 5-on-5 shifts the whole game. So 15 of them are Karlsson and Chychrun. That's significant. It means that that Washington wants that matchup. I am wondering how much longer they are going to want that matchup because the boy genius line ate them alive. It was not close. Corsi 4, 28-8 for the Montreal Canadiens with that line on the ice, 77%. Expected goals for the Montreal Canadiens while that line was on, 77.5%. Scoring chances, 11-3 for Montreal, 78.5%. High danger scoring chances, 6-2 Montreal, 75%. I don't know if Washington wants to be playing with fire that much. I know that that's your big boy defensive pairing, and they're going to get the lion's share of matchups, and it allows them to play their other defensive pairings in more suitable matchups for them. But if the Canadiens' top line can continue to do that to the Chychrun pairing, and they get any kind of secondary offense, this might be tilting advantage Montreal, because if the Suzuki line is the most underrated line in the league and that people just don't believe that it is a true number one line.
Or that it's as good as it is.
Yes, it's an excellent line. Spencer Carberry of Washington said that it's the best line in the league since Four Nations. Statistically, they're yeah. And I think that's a lot of gassing your opponent up, right? That happens a lot around this time of year.
Yeah.
You don't want to give them any bulletin board material. You kind of just want to, let a sleeping dog lie, so to speak. But look, like the Caps defensive pairings, Sandin and Roy was their top pairing at 5-on-5 with 17 minutes, 12 seconds. They played mostly against the fourth line and the new hook line. And they did that to the tune of 62.9% of the expected goals. So they were good. And they had a softer matchup against the fourth line, which generated, I guess, some work down low, but didn't get much out of it from a scoring chance perspective. And the New Hook line, which was abysmal. They just didn't get anything done against Washington. Chychrun and Karlsson. Yeah, exactly. And they had I had the number here, 5.5% expected goals for that New Hook line.
They absolutely need to be better.
And it like I thought about this on my way in this morning was, if Kirby Dach was healthy, even if he was playing as the Kirby Dach that we saw this year, not necessarily the one we expected to see, how different is this series? How different is that game? I don't know that it's that much different because
not a lot. No, marginally better.
I don't know that he's that much of an improvement at center over New Hook, right?
Right. The way he's playing now, absolutely. And we can't play, or Marty can't play Kirby Dach in the hopes that he's going to be the Kirby Dach we think he can be, right? In reality, even if he was healthy, there would still be a lot of questions about the number 2C on this team. And I think, it's also, you've got two offensive weapons on that team. You've got Patrick on that line. You've got Patrick Laine. You've got Ivan Demidov. Like, you should be generating a lot more scoring chances. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It should not be like that.
Yeah. They start a lot of their possessions in the offensive zone. The only line that starts in the offensive zone more often is the Suzuki line. The New Hook line gets their fair share of offensive zone faceoffs. The problem is that Alex Newhook was 25% at the draw. That you're just not gonna win doing that. I kind of wonder in that scenario if it makes sense to take Newhook off the ice in that moment and put Dvorak out there to just get that draw and maybe change or maybe generate a chance. But as it is, like they can't get anything going with that line out there because even though they get those offensive zone starts, 1 in every 4 of them is going back the other way, or 3 of every 4 of them is going back the other way.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to point out here is the third pair for Washington, which is Alexiev and Trevor Van Riemsdyk. They played 12 minutes and 19 seconds at 5-on-5. They got mostly the Dvorak line and the fourth line, but what I found interesting was that they had no defensive zone starts. They started every shift either on the fly, in the neutral zone, or in the offensive zone. They are sheltering that pairing. So when the series shifts back to Montreal and they have last change, I feel like that's a pairing they're going to target. Yeah. Because right now it's getting some soft minutes. The Devo line, the fourth line, they didn't do all that much. The Dvorak line was okay. The fourth line worked a lot down low, but didn't generate much out of it. That is a pairing that I think they're going to try to target because I think Washington is showing their hand a little bit that they're nervous about that pairing. What's funny to me is Chychrun and Karlsson started a ton of draws in the offensive zone and got caved anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. I think that getting more from lines 2 through 4, any kind of secondary scoring, and I feel like this is a different series for Montreal.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to see how they play moving forward. We'll kind of get into more of that in our preparations for game 2. The last thing I have here was sort of the defensive pairings for Montreal and the matchups that Washington wanted to get. So Matheson and Carrier really got a healthy dose of Ovechkin, Strome, and Beauvillier. Didn't really go well for those guys. They got caved. That happens against a forward line like that. Gouli and Hudson got a steady dose of McMichael, Dubois, and Wilson. More on that in a second. And Struble and Savard kind of got the third and fourth lines. I found that was interesting that they didn't try to go after that pairing much. I think the Canadiens kind of got lucky that pairing didn't get targeted by Washington because they easily could have. But I found it even more interesting that the Capitals want that second line of all really, really massive guys to go against Lane Hudson. And it's going to be a test for that line. Tom Wilson didn't have a great game statistically. He was throwing the body around like he does. But I found it interesting that they glued them to the Gouli Hudson pairing. And they generally did okay for themselves, especially as the game went on. But there was a lot of shell shock in the beginning of that game. They just were not expecting the onslaught that was going to come from them. Caden Gouli talked about it a lot, saying, I had no idea what to expect going into that game. So lots of really interesting. Yeah, exactly. Lots of really interesting matchups to pick apart as the series unfolds. But if you're watching the games, watch for these things. Watch for the Alexiev and Trevor Van Riemsdyk pairing. If they get stuck out there on an icing and Montreal can get their top line against them, that's an opportunity to strike.
Line out there.
Absolutely. Like as soon as like it's not even if they just came off the ice, it's not a question. If you're in Washington and they're out there for icing, you have to get your guys out there to score against them.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see because I think Gouli and Hudson are going to continue to get that Washington second line. They have to find a way to break through a little bit easier than they did in that first game. So really exciting stuff. I had a lot of fun going through this and sort of picking apart the X's and O's aspect of this.
And I'm really glad you had a lot of fun doing that because I would not have been able to get any of that out of the numbers. I would have just looked at that and been like, Ian, what does this mean? All right. To build on that, let's talk a little bit about preparing for game 2 and how the Canadiens can actually potentially win that game. And that's coming up in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. I'm going to say that again. If you're a new customer, you join FanDuel and you place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props. You know I love those player props. From three-pointers to steals to assists, FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, after the game tips off, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That's FanDuel.com. I was on mute.
Both of us were. That was wild.
That was fun. All right. This is not how the Canadiens should start the second period. I want to emphasize that. All right. So to build on what you were talking about a little bit, I thought it was really interesting listening to the players talk after the game and in today's media availability, and a little bit with Martin St. Louis as well. Like everybody alluded to the first 10 minutes, right? Or the first period. The questions the media asked, like the first period, they separated that first period from the rest of the game, right? But I think, for us, it seemed fairly obvious as outside observers that Washington was going to come out and try to hit everyone. I don't know if it was just us kind of predicting that that's what happens when new players join the league or get into the playoffs for the first time or whatever. Or it could be just what people were talking about the Capitals' game plan being, right? And so I think, I thought it was really funny that Cole Caufield talked about he does not recommend being hit by Alex Ovechkin, right? But one of the things that my friends and I were talking about when we were watching the game was it felt like they practiced getting hit because they seemed like they expected it, right? Like they seemed like, to me, it seemed less like they didn't expect it, but also more that they expected it but couldn't overcome it in the first period, right? Especially those first 10 minutes, they looked terrifying. And I think that's part of it is one, players like Cole Caufield and Lane Hudson, they're going to have to experience this their entire careers. So they have to figure something out, right? Whereas with your Goulies, your Strubles, all of that, you do have some physicality to throw back. You just have to be able to pick your moments. And I think, a lot of the reason people were talking about Arber Xhekaj drawing back into the lineup was just because the Canadiens seemed so outmatched in that department at the beginning. So I think, part of preparing for game 2 is just understanding that that's something that can happen, and that now that you've experienced it and weathered it, you understand. And Marty today was talking in his press conference about, he called them in French, pockets, right? And he was talking about how the Canadiens were able to withstand that pressure, but because of that, because of the way they had to play in order to withstand that pressure, when there were opportunities, the pockets he's talking about, the opportunities to exploit, they weren't able to do that on the other end. So what he wants them to be able to do is to be able to exploit those opportunities, which I think we all can agree that if you're the Montreal Canadiens and you're trying to beat a team that is more experienced, deeper, better, bigger, et cetera, everything is about exploiting opportunities.
Yeah, because they're going to have to pick their spots and take advantage of the chances that they get, because they're not going to get a ton of them. I thought that, especially early on, Washington is just going to do Washington things, but I think they're going to tire themselves out as this series goes along, because all of that physical play early on, yes, it kept the Canadiens out of the game early, but it didn't have the sort of war of attrition effect that they expected it to have. Maybe that changes course over the the course of this series, and maybe by the end of it, Montreal is banged and bruised and they're having a hard time dealing with it. But I mean, they dealt 33 hits of their own. I mean, they got hit 42 times, but it's not like they got run out of the building over the course of the game. And it looked like later on, Washington was slowing down in that respect. You cannot keep that pace up that long. It's very difficult to do that. It's why Tom Wilson doesn't play like that for 82 games, because you just can't. You can't bring yourself to do it, because when you do that, you end up like the Tkachuks, who are excellent elite hockey players who play that way too often and get into these. They're like, Tkachuk, Matthew Tkachuk is a game time decision for their first game as we're, recording this in the Battle of Florida. And Brady Tkachuk was in and out of the lineup towards the end of the season, and he's playing now, but we know he's not healthy, because it's impossible to keep up that kind of pace, no matter how big and strong you are. Like, it's just, you're putting your body through so much. With that said, it would be nice to see more of that from Slafkovsky. We didn't get a lot of big, mean, angry Slav really since that one game against Ottawa. That one game, we got angry Slav, and it was awesome. And he was being compared to Brady Tkachuk, like he wants to play like that. And then we kind of haven't gotten a lot of that. I give him game one because, it's his first playoff game. It's a lot of guys' first playoff game. And I know it's tough to say this. Now it's not your first playoff game. You do have a taste of what that is. The expectation coming out needs to be that Slafkovsky is a force physically. Now, that's not to say that he was a slouch. Both goals were created because his big butt was in front of the net and causing havoc in front of the net. That's how you can use your size without laying guys out, right? Like, I'd rather see him do that and win board battles with physicality than try to like truck somebody, because like this leads directly to goals. It leads directly to offense, which is, sort of, he's got soft man skills and a big man body. That's sort of how Slafkovsky has developed as this has gone along. So I don't see the physical aspect of this. We're going to talk about Arber Xhekaj again, because this is the story that isn't going to go away until it does. But I don't know how much the Canadiens should be worried about the physicality moving forward. They've proven that they can weather it, and that eventually, if Washington wants to keep playing that pace, they're going to slow down and give you your spots. You just have to keep it close throughout the course of that, physical onslaught.
You mentioned in the first segment, it's the playoffs, we elevate our game. And I think we saw that from Cole Caufield and Nick Suzuki.
Yeah.
They're one of the few, they're two of the few players on this team that have played meaningful playoff hockey, right? They are some of the most experienced people on this team. So I think that the rest of the lineup will kind of fall in line and follow suit. I think they were overwhelmed, excited, nervous, etc., etc. And to their credit, they were able to pick it back up and fix it, right, over the course of the game. And there was a lot of talk about that, right? Like, there was a lot of talk about separating the game into the first period and then the rest of the game. And again, it's not like they played 40 perfect minutes after that. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that, they're able to do that. They have that capability. So now there's no excuse, right? And I think one of the biggest things is that if we get a little bit more from the third line, if we get even a little bit more from that second line, you're talking a whole new ball game, right? I thought the fourth line did their fourth line things. I think they were, they were pretty magnificent. And the second line, the third line too. Like, I don't want to I don't want it to feel like I'm like scapegoating them or saying like they were bad in any way. Like, you just need a little bit more from them, right? And then you need a lot more from the second line, but I'd settle for a little more.
I think one of the things that'll help that the Dvorak, Anderson, Gallagher line is just getting a dang bounce. I mean, there was that one chance where Gallagher was right in front of Thompson at the end of the second period, and the puck just kept getting further and further away from him. He just couldn't corral it. It was, it's sort of like you're like in a dream, and no matter how far you run, you don't go anywhere. Like, that's what that looks like. I think that line, that needs to be the experience line. They started the game with that line for a reason. I'd like to see more, tomfoolery from Josh Anderson, quite honestly, because I mean, outside of him, knocking over Tom Wilson as they were changing lines during a stoppage, which, by the way, Tom Wilson's so big and strong, and then a stiff breeze comes along, and he's whoa, and he folds like a cheap ladder. Like, I find that so funny. Anyway,
The Sens are looking to trade for him as we speak.
yeah, for sure. I just think that line has more to give, not so much directly from an offensive standpoint, but from an identity standpoint. Like, Josh Anderson, get in there, throw the body. Gallagher was throwing the body a ton in game one, which was nice to see. Hopefully he's hanging in there. We know that he might be nursing something at the moment, but we'll see how that ends up playing out.
Without looking it up, how old is Brendan Gallagher?
How old is Brendan Gallagher? 33.
Okay, so he's 32. We were trying to guess that. I think he's going to turn 33. And I could swear that he was 34. Like, I was literally arguing with people that he's going to be 35 years old. Like, this is how much this man has thrown his body around throughout his career. So, that's what we're saying. Like, Brendan Gallagher can do it, so can every other person on this lineup. Except also with Josh Anderson, like, a little bit worried about all three of those guys getting injured because they're all kind of playing through stuff. So, anyways, so we'll see how they elevate their game in that second game. And again, like, we have every reason to be optimistic about the series so far. And I'm really excited for game 2 because at the end of the day, like, we're talking about the Canadiens aren't even supposed to be here, et cetera, et cetera. At the beginning of the season, people would have laughed at you if you said that they were going to be in the playoffs, right? Like, even like the mix seemed like a distant reality, right? And we've left the mix behind. So we want to enjoy game 2 and just think about it, right? Like, we're not going to lose hope because this is remember the first season that Chicago Cup that ended, the Chicago team that ended up winning 3 cups, that first season they made the playoffs. They were kicked out, I think, in 6 games, right? So 6 or 7 games against, I believe, Vancouver. So I'm just saying, let's enjoy this because going forward, like next year, we can start being stressed out about whether or not they're going to win series. This year, we should enjoy it, but I still think they can win it. All right. In our third segment, we're going to talk about the favorite topic of this fan base, and that is Arber Xhekaj, and that's coming up in just one moment. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better-for-you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no-shells variety. It is the perfect grab-and-go snack for busy days. Whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or I just need a quick protein boost, they're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, or you want to make a little tower with them, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. No Shell's Wonderful Pistachios have that grab-and-go ease, but there's a satisfying crack of opening each shell, snack meditation, getting all of your protein at the same time. Get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, let's get into Arber Xhekaj. So if you were watching Marty's press availability after today's practice, today being Tuesday, you will have noticed that almost all of the journalists, asked pointed questions about how Marty felt about his defense. And then they asked him what they thought of Jaden Strubl's game. And then they kept asking about defense. And then finally someone was like, are you thinking about playing Arber Xhekaj in the next game? And Marty said, like, something about how do you feel about Arber Xhekaj? And he said he's part of our roster, which I thought was,
you want the quote as he walked off?
What was the quote? He said,
So he
I
says,
don't know what you guys want to, what answer you guys are looking for.
I know what you guys are trying to get me to answer. I have Xhekaj. It's a card. I might play him. It's good to have. And then glared at them as he walked off the mic. This is bothering Marty. Not in the sense that, at least I don't get the sense that he's mad, like that he has to talk about Arber Xhekaj. I don't think that's it. I think it's mostly just like a second guessing of his team's toughness.
Yeah.
They're basically saying, like, you guys got thrown around out there. Don't you need to put Xhekaj in? And I don't think Marty agrees with that.
No.
And I think that bothers him to a certain extent, as it should. You're challenging not only the coach's decision, which every coach gets mad about, of course, but you're challenging that the rest of this team can play physically, which if you've watched them all year, like that's just not that's not a thing. They took their pound of flesh in this game just as Washington did. Washington's bigger and stronger and more experienced. We expected them to come out that way. But I also think we have to, and we had this conversation yesterday, and we're going to have it again and again and again and again. One, Xhekaj does not team toughness make. Putting him on the ice. Okay, so let's say they put him in against Washington in game 2, and they take Jaden Struble out. You're getting 14 minutes out of Arber Xhekaj. How much of an impact can he have in 14 minutes? That means there is what, 46 minutes where he's not on the ice? Like it's not this game-changing proposition to put this player in. He might give you an edge defense or physically. He might be a challenge defensively. And maybe the Capitals try to poke and prod him to try to get him to take penalties because he might do it. And one of the thoughts I had was, okay, now you've put him in, and instead of showing the poise that you showed in game 1, where you kind of let Washington run out of steam, now you have a guy who's going to go out and act as a bit more of an antagonist. Not to say that that's a wrong thing, but now are you making life harder on the rest of your team by giving Washington more of an excuse to start throwing the body even more? I wonder about that balance to a certain extent. Where are you on this?
So I think what Marty said in his response to the initial Arber Xhekaj question was, if you want to insert someone, you have to take someone out. And, I have to think about how everyone else played. And I do think he mentioned Jaden Struble by name, if I remember correctly. And he said something like, whatever I do, it's not going to change the way Tom Wilson plays. And I think that was the key. It's not going to change the way Tom Wilson plays. If anything, Tom Wilson is just going to get encouraged and just get even more physical, right? And what we want to do, we want to be able to weather those hits, but we really don't want to give Tom Wilson an opportunity to elbow someone in the head.
Yeah.
To take the liberty, right?
Yeah, and Tom Wilson didn't play all that well in game 1. Statistically, he wasn't that great. You probably want to keep Tom Wilson on the ice right now for Montreal, right? Yeah. Like he's a vulnerable player for that team in the sense that like the second line started with a lot of gusto early and they kind of tapered off as the game went because I think they spent a lot of their battery early on in that game. I love the line that putting Arber Xhekaj in is not going to change Tom Wilson plays. In other words, and it's something that we've argued about enforcers or whatever, he's not a deterrent. These guys are not deterrents. I know everybody loves to come to that conclusion that, see, guys take more runs at the Canadiens when Arber Xhekaj isn't in the lineup. I completely disagree. Because I just don't know
the same amount of runs. It's just sometimes Arber Xhekaj loses his head and then gets in the penalty box.
Well, you also just can't prove it. Like, what is more runs? They get hit more? Okay, I guess. But, like, maybe that's a symptom of them having the puck more when Arber Xhekaj isn't in the game. You get hit more when you have the puck more. So, like, I have a hard time with that aspect of this. The thing is like, they could put him in game 2. I don't know that they will. The lines at practice were exactly the same. With the exception of Gallagher, who missed practice, but Marty said everything's fine, so we have to take him at his word for that. But like, we're making a mountain out of a molehill here in that it's a third pairing defenseman, guys. Like, we're not talking about, adding, a second Caden Gooley to this team, right? It's Arber Xhekaj. At this point in his career, we know what he is. We're fairly confident in that. I just don't know like why this is such a big problem. At the same time, though, I think I mentioned this yesterday, and I've definitely posted about it today. If you're not going to play him in this series, when are you? And I say that more as a philosophical question of, if you can't play him in this series, a very physical playoff series, when can you? And by that, I mean, like, does he have a place on this team? If this is a scenario where you'd like to be able to play him, but you don't feel confident in it. That's a real challenge right now. I don't know the answer to that. And we'll only know if he gets into the series and shows whether or not he can hang.
Right. And I think the biggest thing, and I know it's almost time for a trivia, but the biggest thing is, like, Marty said, you remove someone, right? So is Arber Xhekaj better than all of the other defensemen currently dressing? Or any, not all, sorry, I said all, I misspoke. is Arber Xhekaj better than any of the defensemen that are currently dressed, right? They're currently dressing for games. And when that answer becomes yes, then you play him. The answer to that question should be yes, he's better than the way X is playing right now, whoever that X is. And Tom Wilson, Ovechkin, the number of hits the Washington Capitals throw, all of that should not be the decision that the reason that you make this decision. It should literally be, I'm looking at this guy, he's better than this person, I'm removing that person and putting Arber Xhekaj in the lineup. That's it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think I do think we're going to see him in this series. I do. Yeah. I just don't know if game 2 is the time to do that. When the Canadiens have the chance to go out there and get a split and, maybe they can shock Washington a little bit. Maybe you start him at home in game 3 and you can control the matchup a little bit better and get him away from people you don't want him to be near.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So it's all gamesmanship. I think we're going to see him. So everyone take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. We're going to see him. Marty doesn't hate him. Marty's annoyed by these questions because it's an annoying question to be asked constantly.
Also, somebody said today, I can't remember what it was, like, people are just too emotional about Arber Xhekaj. And I feel that way 100%. I'm too emotional about the way people are emotional about Arber Xhekaj. All right, let's get into our trivia.
Yeah, let's do yesterday's question first. Lane Hutson became the 3rd youngest defenseman to record a point in his first playoff game for the Montreal Canadiens, who were the 2 younger defensemen to record a point in their playoff debuts. Do you have the answer to this one, Laura?
I believe one of them is PK Subban.
Correct. 2010, an assist on Camilleri's goal in Game 5.
And the other one is Peter Svoboda?
Correct. Game 1 against Boston, 1985. He scored in that game, assisted by Guy Carbonneau. They ended up losing that game. PK won the game in 2010 because the Canadiens needed to. It was game 5. It was do or die. And it was, he kind of looked off a shot and gave Camilleri like a blind pass that he just hammered home for his second goal in the first period. Those were the days. Mike Camilleri, always my guy. All right. Today's question. When was the last time the Montreal Canadiens lost game 1 of a series in overtime? Not game 1 of a first round series necessarily. It might be. But game 1 of a series in overtime. If you have the answer, put it in the comments down below and tell us how smart you are and how happy or sad you were with the outcome of that series.
That one stumped me, I have to be honest. But you guys could probably do a better job than I can. So please make sure that you send us your guesses or, the right answer. You can leave them in the comments on YouTube. You can also email them to us. You can send them to us on Blue Sky or Instagram or TikTok. And we are Locked On Canadiens on all of those media. Please subscribe to this podcast. Tell your friends. Subscribe on YouTube. We forgot our contest. We're giving away 2 signed pictures once we hit 4,500 subscribers and once we hit 5,000 subscribers. Signed picture of Josh Anderson, signed picture of Arber Xhekaj. Ian is giving his precious stuff away, so make sure you enter that contest. Be subscribed, write contest entry in the comments on YouTube. Also, you can follow us on social media. Ian is at Maybe It's Ian. I'm at The Active Stick. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you after game 2.